Yes, we are connected on Facebook.
Okay. So we welcome all viewers today for a special session on today's topic. The topic for today is the absolute truth ultimately personal or impersonal? Today's session conducted by special guest Shri Pratik Desai ji. A brief introduction. Pratik Desai ji, uh, he has earned his master's degree in aerospace engineering from the University of Florida, and that is where he got connected to ISKCON Gainesville Temple, where he became a disciple of His Holiness Radhanath Swami Maharaj. Later on, he moved to Mumbai and got connected to ISKCON Chapati. He has been currently practicing bhakti for about 15 years. He's a very scholarly devotee who regularly reads the scriptures and books by Srila Prabhupada and other Gaudiya Vaishnava acharyas. Pratik ji conducts online classes regularly to systematically educate and guide all the seekers, spiritual seekers in the path of bhakti. He has delivered lectures on Bhagavad Gita and various other scriptures, Vaishnava scriptures, and also numerous festival classes. He has a unique distinction of being among the world's top 3 Srimad Bhagavatam distributors, and he has been guiding many devotees from different parts of the world along with while conducting his household duties. So apart from this, he is also a successful businessman and the author of 20 plus must-know facts about Hinduism. So Pratik Desai ji, over to you. The topic is the absolute truth ultimately personal or impersonal?
Okay. Thank you, Rajiv ji, for the kind introduction. And thank you all the viewers also to participate. This is a very interesting topic. And there has been debate going on since a long time, especially between the Vaishnavas and the impersonalists. So I wanted to share many, I would say, multiple perspectives on this particular topic, rather than just sharing through the eyes of scriptures or from a particular section. I wanted to share from a holistic point of view, not just from Shastra Praman, but also from Pratyaksh, which is direct perception, as well as Anuman, logical inference. So the most common asked question is whether the absolute is a person ultimately or impersonal, which means whether the absolute truth has a personality or is impersonal. And that means if the absolute has to have a personality, it also means that the absolute must have Shaktis along with his persona. Because anything in the material world also we see the supreme truth is, a person is always connected with the Shaktis, potencies. And the material world is just a perverted reflection of the spiritual world. So whatever is existing in the material world is also there in the spiritual world. But the material world has a perverted reflection of the spiritual world. And we see in the material world that we have bodies, we have personalities, we have characteristic traits, and we exchange relationship between different living entities. So if it is possible in the material world, why not in the spiritual realm? Generally, people think or they conceive that because spirituality is transcendental, it is beyond the material world. So nothing material can define spirituality. And that's why most of the people think that if something is material, it cannot be applicable to the spiritual reality or the absolute reality, because it's conceived in our intelligence and mind, which is a material product. Whereas spirituality or the absolute reality has nothing to do with the material realm. So how can the absolute reality be a person also? Because generally the body is a product of the mode of material natures. It is the product of you can say it is actually the material manifestation, and it includes earth, water, fire. All these material elements are there. So it is made up of the Panch Mahabhuta elements, and it is also composed of the subtle elements, which is mind, intelligence, ego. So the body is made up of 8 elements. And because all these 8 elements, they are not part of the spiritual realm, that's why the Lord, the Supreme Absolute Truth, cannot have personality. So this is actually the common misconception that most of the people have in many different schools which are practiced throughout the world. Plus, there is also not much description which is given in many scriptures of the world, apart from the Vedic scriptures, regarding the personality of the Supreme Lord. Like, how does he look? Where does he live? What are his activities? What are his pastimes? The qualities of the Supreme. So these are not described in detail in many scriptures of the world, apart from the Vedic scriptures. So that's why the most of the religions in the world, they somehow end up describing the absolute truth as a impersonalist rather than being a personalist, because there is no description at all about the personality traits of the supreme absolute truth. So it is very important to understand the highest tattva of the absolute from all angles of vision, not just from the scriptures, because everyone quotes scriptures in order to prove that the absolute truth is personal or impersonal. But then it is also very important to understand from different angles of vision why this absolute truth is simultaneously personal as well as impersonal. Vedanti tat tattvavidam tattva vyadgyanam advayam brahmeti paramatmeti bhagwan iti sabdate. So this is a very famous popular verse from the Srimad Bhagavatam, which describes that the absolute truth has to be realized in 3 forms. It can be realized in 3 forms. Brahmeti, Paramatmeti, Bhagwan iti sabdate, which is the state of Brahman, the state of Paramatma, and the state of Bhagwan. Okay. So, okay, any questions till now? Any comments or any questions?
No, bro. It's fine.
Okay. So I would like to start with some information regarding how this concept of impersonalism has pervaded throughout India and many parts of the world also.
So basically, one small perspective. Impersonalism reject the personal aspect of the Supreme God, correct?
Yeah, so there are philosophers who reject the idea of personalism, and then there are philosophers who also accept it, but then they state that the impersonal aspect is the highest aspect of the Lord.
Is what?
There are some philosophers who say that the impersonal aspect of the absolute truth is supreme, and the personal aspect of the supreme is actually a material form, because they think that whenever there is a living entity who comes in the material world, then he has to accept a material body, just like we are describing about the body which is made up of 8 elements. So they think that whenever the Lord has to come, or whenever Brahman or the Supreme has to come in the material world, then he has to accept a material form. So there are different philosophers who claim and believe differently.
So essentially, either they reject the personal aspect of God, or they will consider that, interpret that as inferior of material, as in it's a temporary aspect that Lord takes to conduct whatever he wants to do, and then he returns back to his impersonal form. So impersonal form is actually the supreme form. That is the concept of impersonalism. Whereas the Vaishnava philosophy says that impersonal and personal both are uh, equivalent, or rather maybe personal form is the supreme form of God. The personal aspect is the supreme aspect of God.
Yeah, so see, the Mayavadis, they claim that whenever the Lord appears in the material world, then the form of the Lord is material, and it is also a part of product of Maya. That's interpreted by the Mayavadis. And then there are certain impersonalists who also know that there is a personality aspect of the supreme absolute truth, but they are more inclined to worship the impersonal form of the Lord. Although they may regard the personal aspect of the Lord as superior, this is also possible. In any case, whether they treat us superior or inferior, but they are more inclined towards worshipping the impersonal aspect of the Lord by
So,
their own desire.
so
So
none,
there are different categories of impersonalist. One is Mayavadi, one is Advaitvadi, one is impersonalist. These are all different categories who are worshipping, or they think that the impersonal aspect is the superior aspect and the personality aspect is the inferior one.
so none of the theistic philosophies rejects the impersonal form of God. Correct?
Yeah, none of, yes, that's right. So see, this is a very important point. None of the Vaishnav philosophers, they claim that Brahman is not existing, because there are clear statements in the scriptures which say that Brahman is existing. There are many, in fact, in the Vaishnav scriptures also, we'll see that, like for example, Srimad Bhagavatam, Padma Puran, the scriptures in the mode of goodness, the Puranas. You'll see a lot of statements which are made that the referring to Brahman. Sometimes even the Lord is referred to as the Supreme Brahman. Where like we understand that Brahman is referring to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but there is direct word also used in the scriptures referring to Brahman. So it is not Bhagwan or it is not Purusha, it is Brahman. So Krishna has also been described as like, like the Supreme Brahman like that. So we definitely acknowledge that Brahman exists. In fact, the Bhagavatam main verse which I have already quoted, Vedanti Tattva Vidams, Tattvam Yad Jnanam Advayam, Brahmeti Paramatmeti Bhagavan Iti Sabhyate. The Bhagavatam clearly establishes the fact that the absolute truth exists in three phases, three forms simultaneously. Now, it also establishes that the supreme or the highest or the superior form is the ultimately the personal aspect of the Lord, which is also done in the Bhagavad Gita. We'll go through the verses from the Gita also. So it is very, and see, that's why I just wanted to begin with the fact that it was actually Shankaracharya who introduced this concept of Mahavakyas, the four Mahavakyas. And let me share the four Mahavakyas according to Shankaracharya. And then there are other Mahavakyas also, but these are the primary Mahavakyas, which is Tattvamasi. The first one is Tattvamasi, which means you are that. Tattvamasi, you are that, which means you are Brahman. Okay. Then Aham Brahmasmi, which refers to I am Brahman. And then Prajnanam Brahman. Okay. So these are the, and then, okay, sorry. The last one is the I am Atma Brahma. The self is Brahman. So these are the four primary Mahavakyas, which was referred to Mahavakyas by Shankaracharya of the Advaita school. Now, out of Shankaracharya's, views of these particular four statements of the Upanishad as Mahavakya, none of the others have claimed that these are the four Mahavakyas. And another secondary four principal Mahavakyas or the secondary Mahavakyas is that Ekam Eva Advitiyam Brahma. Brahman is one without a second. Then Soham. Soham means I am that. Then Sarvam Klam Idam Brahma. Everything, all of this is Brahman. And then Etad by Tat. This verily is that. It is, and he has quoted different Upanishads like the Ekam Eva Advitiyam Brahma. Brahman is one without a second. That is from Chandogya Upanishad. Soham is Vishwopanishad. Sarvam Klam Idam Brahma is from Chandogya Upanishad. And Etad Vaitat is from Katha Upanishad. And similarly, Tattvamasi is from Chandogya Upanishad. Aham Brahmasmi from Brihant Aranyaka Upanishad. Then Prajnanam Brahma is from the Atreya Upanishad. And Ayam Atma Brahma is from Atharveda, Mandukya Upanishad of Atharveda. So these are the Mahavakyas according to Shankaracharya. These are not Mahavakyas according to any other philosopher, including obviously the Vaishnava philosopher also. So he's the one who actually introduced these statements. And then, although it certainly refers to the Brahman, but then it has to be understood in the context also. So Shankaracharya is the one who actually interpreted these verses to mean that you are Brahman, you have become Brahman, or you can become Brahman. It's just a matter of realization that you are in Maya, you are in ignorance. Once you attain knowledge, you realize that you are Brahman. Right? So this is the philosophy propagated by Shankaracharya. None of the other philosophers, they are claiming this, that these are the Mahavakyas. Okay, let's assume that these may be the Mahavakyas also. But all the other acharyas, now see, it is very interesting that later on Sripad Madhvacharya and Sripad Ramanujacharya, when they came, so they used all the same Mahavakyas of Shankaracharya and they interpreted it differently in a Vaishnava context, in a Vaishnava understanding of the scriptures. And then they also quoted whatever Shankaracharya quoted, whatever statements he quoted from Upanishad, they quoted the same verses because they wanted to refute the interpretation by Shankaracharya. So they quoted the same verses, but they gave it a completely different interpretation. Okay. But nowhere in the scriptures or nowhere in their commentaries, nowhere in their interpretation, they have refuted that Brahman does not exist. Right? So Brahman does exist. That is acknowledged by everyone. But it is explained in relation with Bhagwan. It is also explained in relation with Paramatma. That's why Jiva Goswami has also written the Bhagavad Sandarbh and he has also written the Paramatma Sandarbh that establishes the position of Paramatma and the position of Bhagwan. Okay. So any questions?
So is the absolute truth ultimately personal or impersonal? Is something like, is it personal means one, that you have a form, so you can look at him and speak to him, so you can identify him as one. But impersonal means energy, and energy is infinite. So he's simultaneously one and infinite. That is the contention that you are going to touch upon through the various verses.
Yes. And I'm also going to share how Shankaracharya's Advaita Vedanta, the way he has interpreted, is actually even not Vedanta. So we will share certain grammatical sections from, there is one professor, Charles Fillion, and he's a extremely popular and very scholarly in Sanskrit language. So he has published an article and we'll go through the article and I will explain how Advait is not even a Vedanta. It is not even a part of Vedanta. Although some Advait, like Advaitvadis, they claim that we are Vedanta, we are followers of Vedantas. But he has somehow established that this is not even part of Vedanta. Why? Because of the simple fact that Advaitvadis, they are rejecting the personality of the Lord. At the same time, they are also rejecting other portion of the scriptures, which is supposed to be. So basically, they are making it very incoherent. It is not consistent with the Vedanta philosophy because Vedanta philosophy has, it is all inclusive philosophy. As I shared earlier, that Vedanta also shares many personal statements, not just impersonal statements. So the fact that Advaitvadis, they are rejecting the personal statements in the scriptures, it disqualifies them to be considered as a Vedanta follower. Because if you want to accept something, you have to accept in its entirety. You cannot reject certain part of the scriptures and claim that we are the followers of the entire scripture, right? It makes sense. So I will show that. I will show that. And I will share that. In fact, Ramanujacharya and Madhvacharya have even gone to the extent of saying that this Mayavad concept is an imaginary concept. It does not yield any result. There is no attainment of the position called as Brahman. Like they are saying that we can become Brahman. We are capable of realizing that we are Brahman. But according to Madhvacharya and Ramanujacharya, this is something which is imaginary. There is no goal in this particular process because they offend the Lord. The Mayavadis, they are offenders to the Lord because they completely reject the personality of the Supreme Lord. In fact, the Bhagavad Gita, in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna himself says that Avajananti Mam Muda Manusham Tanum Ashritam, right? And this verse is there in the yeah, so in the 9th chapter itself, in the 11th verse. So Avajananti Mam Muda Manusham Tanum Ashritam. So fools deride me as being material. And they actually they fall down from their position. So Krishna clearly says that Avajananti ma muda. Muda means foolish. These are foolish people. So they do not have proper understanding of my tattva. Okay. So we'll discuss about many verses from Bhagavad Gita, from the Upanishads, the most prominent verses from these scriptures to establish that the Supreme Lord also has a personality. Now, okay, so let's start with the um, the commentary of this scholar who has somehow established that Advaita is not even Vedanta. Okay, so now now see, he has himself claimed that he was Advaitavadi earlier, but then after 15 years of studying Sanskrit grammar and also understanding the philosophy very closely, he realized that ultimately the philosophy of Vedanta is not Advaita. Okay, and so he is quoting the verse from the Bhagavad Gita, which is 13.13. And the 13.13, 13th chapter, verse number 13, the verse says, it is stated that Gyayam yat tat pravakshami yaj gyanat amritam asnute anadi mat param brahma nasattan nasat uchyate. So the Bhagavad Gita 13.13. See, now let me share the screen also so that our viewers can, audience can also view the exact verse I'm referring to. 13.13. So we'll see the Vaishnav translation by Srila Prabhupada, the way he has translated, and we'll also see how Shankaracharya interprets this verse. I'm sharing the screen. Okay, are you able to see the screen? Gyayam yat tatra vakshyami yat gyat va amritam asnute anadi mat param brahma nasattan nasat uchyate. Okay, the synonyms. So this is the translation by A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, which is definitely a Vaishnav's translation. The way he's translating is Gyayam, the knowable, Yat, which Tat, that Pravakshyami, I shall now explain. Yat, which Gyatva, knowing, Amritam, nectar, Asnute, one taste, Anadi, beginningless, Mat Param, subordinate to me, Brahma, spirit, Na, neither, Sat, cause, Tat, that, Na, nor, Asat, effect, Uchyate is said to be. See, Sanskrit is such a flexible language that you can connect and separate two words together, and that will produce an entirely opposite meaning. Okay, so we'll see from this verse now. So the translation, I shall now explain the knowable, knowing which you will taste the eternal Brahman, the spirit, beginningless and subordinate to me, lies beyond the cause and effect of this world. So in this particular word, according to Krishna, or according to the Vaishnava translation, it is established that Krishna says that the Brahman is actually subordinate to me. It's very clearly stated. Okay. We'll not go to the purport of this verse, but now let's see what this scholarly personality says. According, like, commenting on the commentary of Shankaracharya. So Shankara twists the rules of Sanskrit phonetics and makes the wording Anadimat, Param Brahma. So what it does, see, actually let me keep sharing the screen. So see here, the original verse, Anadi Mat, these are two different words. They are not combined together. Okay, but what Shankaracharya does, he combines Anadi Mat as one word. And he makes it Anadi Mat Param Brahma, which basically means that Brahman is beginningless and is inferior to me. So you get opposite meaning completely. Okay, Brahman is beginningless. Okay, there is no contradiction. But now it becomes inferior to me because Anadimat, Param Brahma. So Param Brahma means Brahman becomes superior to me. Anadimat, because he has joined the word together. Whereas the original word is separate. So although it is true that in Sanskrit, the spoken form is given superiority over the written form. So that in this instance, the wording Anadimat may seem to be a valid grammatical form, although all the texts of Bhagavad Gita read Anadi Mat Param as the continuous word joined together instead of joined with Anadi. So Mat is actually connected with Param. The wording Anadimat cannot in fact be made because nowhere in the canon of Sanskrit literature and nowhere in the rules of grammar has the suffix mat, which is expressive of possession, ever been used in a Bahurvriya compound. Rather, the key word here is mat para, inferior to me. A Bahurvrihi compound in which mat is not mat but a replacement of asmat. The literal meaning of mat param is Brahman is one whose superior is I. So these are grammatical meanings or terms. So we'll not be able to understand everything because we have not Sanskrit, we are not experts in Sanskrit grammar also. But it seems that the author is saying that it is very clear that Shankaracharya has twisted the meaning here because he is very clearly claiming that the Anadimat cannot be in fact be made because nowhere in the canon of Sanskrit literature and nowhere in the rules of grammar has the suffix mat, which is expressive of possession, ever been used in the particular compound. Okay, so this he has clearly claimed. And now in another reference to verse number 14.27. So the textual analysis of the Gita verse 13.13 help us to understand another crucial text, which is said to be spoken by Krishna himself. Brahmana hi pratishtha. So see, let's also see the Vaishnava translation of this verse. 14 chapter 27 verse. Brahmana hi pratishtaham amrityasya vyayasya cha shashvatasya cha dharmasya sukhas yai ekantikasya cha. Brahmana of the impersonal Brahmajyoti, he certainly pratishtha, the rest, aham, I am, amritasya of the immortal, avyasya of the imperishable, cha also, shashvatasya of the eternal, cha and dharmasya of the constitutional position, sukhasya of happiness, ekaintikasya, ultimate, cha also. And I am the basis of impersonal Brahman, which is immortal, imperishable, and eternal, and is the constitutional position of ultimate happiness. So here also Krishna establishes very clearly that I am the sustainer of impersonal Brahman. So let's see the commentary of the author. Okay, so Shankaracharya interprets Brahmana in the ablative case. I am the foundation from Brahman. Whereas in the view of text 13.13, which we already previously discussed, only the genitive case is acceptable. I am the foundation of Brahman. That only the genitive applies here is further substantiated by the fact that all the other words in the verse are in the genitive case. So the verse reads, the Brahmana pratishtaham. Let's skip the verse. The word he means because I'm the foundation of Brahman, and is the explanation of the previous verse, which explains that practice of Bhakti Yoga is necessary to achieve the goal of meditation. So in the previous verse, verse number 14.26, it is explained that Bhakti is necessary to achieve the goal of meditation. And so in connection with that, this particular translation is perfect, which is done by our Vaishnava Acharyas. So this is how Shankaracharya has twisted and interpreted the meaning of the Bhagavad Gita as well as the Upanishad also. And then the following concepts are also derived from the above, illustrate further differences between Advaita and the real Vedanta. So we are not talking about the Vaishnava philosophy. In fact, we are comparing Advaita and Vedanta philosophy here. Okay. So then it is mentioned that Shakti belongs to Parameshwar, not Brahman. And Shakti is not only material, the Shakti which is Parameshwar owns power is transcendental, as also given in the Shvetavastra Upanishad 6.8. Parashya Shakti vidaiva shuyate swabhaviki jnana kriya balacha. So it is heard that his transcendental potency is manifold and is inherent in him. So it is also clearly established by the Shvetavastra Upanishad that the Supreme Lord has transcendental potency, Shakti. Now, Brahman obviously does not have any Shakti. And the Upanishad itself is claiming that the Lord has Shakti in himself, or Brahman has Shakti in himself, right? So it means that Brahman has Shakti, whereas Advaita philosophy is saying that Brahman is without any Shakti. Okay, so it is very clearly established by the Vedanta philosophy that it gives all-inclusive philosophy. So then he makes another point. He says that in the canonical text of the Vedanta philosophy are these three sets of scriptures, which is called the Prasthan Trai. Everyone is familiar with the Prasthan Trai, especially in the Vedanta world. The Bhagavad Gita, the Vedanta Sutra, and the Upanishads. Now, among the Upanishads, they are mainly focusing on the 11 major Upanishads. So this favorite mantra of Advaita, Brahma Satyam Jagat Mithyam, is in the Niralamba Upanishad, which is not one of these 11 major Upanishads and is therefore not accepted as canonical text. So the notion of Jagat Mithya is easily rejectable by logic too. The world is illusory, but is not an illusion, like falsely seeing a rope as a snake. Because even after understanding that Brahman is the substratum of everything, the world does not disappear. Whereas after seeing the rope, the illusion of the snake will disappear. So even after achieving self-realization, the Jivan Muktas operate in this world, and the existence of the world is called the Vyavaharika Satta, material existence. Now, another point he states is that in the Vedanta Sutra, Shankaracharya rejects the entire section, Adhikarana, starting from the aphorism, Karta Shastra Artha Vatatvat. So Shankaracharya writes that it was stated with several reasons, beginning from Shastra Artha Vatatvat, that the doership of the soul is inherent. That is wrong. Shariraka Bhashya, this is the commentary. So Shankaracharya rejects the notion that the Jivatman has any degree of doership, such as willpower. So in short, Shankaracharya does not accept that the Jivatma is both identical with and distinct from Brahman. In truth, Vedanta is a philosophy of paradox. Now, what is that paradox? It is Bhed and Abhed. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has also propagated this philosophy of Bhed and Abhed. And he just called it Achintya Bhed Abhed. Achintya because it is inconceivable. We cannot conceive the nature of the spiritual realm. So no one can claim to rightfully expound the Vedanta philosophy while rejecting a portion of the Prasthantraya. Right? So this is how we actually explain the, he has somehow refuted the concept or the notion that Advaita is also Vedanta, whereas actually it is not. So many people, they have this conception that Advaita is Vedanta, it is part of Vedanta philosophy, but because they are rejecting many other statements of the scriptures, that's why Advaita cannot be taken as a part of Vedanta. Okay, any questions till now?
No, bro.
Okay, so you also think that Advaita is not a Vedanta philosophy, right? No longer a Vedanta philosophy. That also, I think, you are convinced.
Yeah, it has been interpreted to suit Advait by certain acharyas, but Vedanta is the peak of Vedas, right? Where the Vedas end, Vedanta. So Bhakti Vedanta, Bhakti starts where the Vedas end. So where is the question of
Yeah,
Advait?
we are discussing Vedanta philosophy. Vedanta basically means as they, it is basically referring to the Vedas, the Atharvaveda, Rig, Sam, Yajurveds. And because they are also divided into four parts: Brahmanya, Aranyakas, Samhitas, Upanishads. So all the followers of Vedanta, they accept Upanishads as the most important authority on scriptures, because the Upanishads, they are the part of the Vedas. So it's also the culmination. So the culmination, the essence of the Vedas. It's basically Gyan Kand section of the Vedas. So it assimilates and culminates in the form of Upanishads. And along with the Upanishads, as we have discussed, that this is the Prastantrai. The authority is also considered to be the Bhagavad Gita as well as the Vedanta Sutra. So whoever is a follower of Vedanta, they will accept these three things as authoritative, which is the Upanishads, the Bhagavad Gita, and the Vedanta Sutra. Now, why Vedanta Sutra? Because they know that Vedanta Sutra is a commentary by Srila Vyasadeva, directly by Vyasadeva. And he has explained the meaning of the Vedas in terms of aphorisms. Although these aphorisms, they are also very complicated. I mean, these are simple one-line statements, but they are also very deep. We cannot understand it so easily. That also requires interpretation. That also requires commentary. Okay. So these Prastantrai are accepted by all the followers of Vedanta. And this is the meaning of Vedanta philosophy. We are not talking in terms of connection with the end of Vedanta, which is Bhakti and all that, but just in the matter, in the context of accepting scriptures. So these are the Vedic scriptures being authoritative. This is Vedanta. Okay. So now let's see some of the, I mean, there are so many statements from the scriptures, because till now we have established that Vedanta is a paradox, because it also has Ved statements in Vedanta. In the Vedas, in the Upanishads, there are statements which talk about contrary things. So now we have heard till now what are the Mahavakyas. So we have seen from one perspective. Now let's see from a contrary perspective, which is from the Vaishnava understanding that the absolute truth is actually a person. So are there any statements in the Upanishad, in the Shastra, in the Puranas? So we have many of them. In fact, Gita is also one of the Prastantrai, and Gita itself, as we have already discussed, 12th chapter, verse number 1 to 5. So then Arjuna is asking a direct question to Krishna, that amongst different paths, amongst the follower impersonalist and those who are your devotees, which is the superior path? Right? And what does Krishna reply? Krishna directly replies that actually my supreme form is the ultimate form, and this is the superior path. In fact, he says that if any impersonalist will try to follow this path of impersonal, if try to follow the impersonalist path, then there are chances that he will fall down from the path, he will deviate, and it will be, the path is also going to be very troublesome and will be filled with obstacles. So let me also share the screen where this verses are there. 12th chapter.
2.
Yeah, so this is directly from the Bhagavad Gita now. So in the screen, you can see the text one. So Arjun watch, Arjun inquired, which are considered to be more perfect? Those who are always properly engaged in your devotional service, or those who worship the impersonal Brahman, the unmanifested. Let's see the Sanskrit also. Arjuna vacha evam satata yukta ye bhaktastvang parupashate ye chapi aksharam avyaktam tesham ke yoga vittama. So see, where is Brahman referred here? Brahman is referred here as aksharam avyaktam. Avyaktam means the unmanifested. Okay, so here Brahman is referred to as avyaktam, and bhaktas tvam paryupasate. So those devotees who worship you properly. Now, who is most perfect? And then so Arjuna is inquiring which are considered to be more perfect. Okay, now let's hear Krishna's reply in the next verse. Shri Bhagavan uvacha Mayi avesha manoye mam nitya yukta upasate shraddhaye parayo petas teme yukta tamamata. So Bhagavan is saying, Mayi avesha manoye mam. Mayi upon me, avesha fixing mana, the mind. Those who mam me, nitya always yukta engage upashate worship. See, here someone can say that Mayi avesh Mano Ema. It can refer to something else. It can refer to the impersonal Brahman. But in the previous verse, it is very clearly spoken by Arjuna. He is referring to the devotees of the Lord because he's using the word bhajate, right? See, bhaktas tvam paryupasate. Bhaktas, not even bhajate, sorry. It's clearly mentioned bhaktas, so devotees of the Lord. Now, this bhaktas cannot have any other meaning because bhakta means bhajate, means worshipping the Lord. So, who can worship the Lord? Only the devotees of the Lord. So, here Krishna has clearly answered the question by saying that Mai avashya mano emam, that my devotees, me, worship me. Now, devotees, they are going to worship, are they going to worship the impersonal form? No, because the impersonalists, they are saying that, well, the Lord's form is material and it is temporary. So, how can the devotees worship a temporary form and attain eternal results? It's not possible because the results attained by bhakti are eternal. The Lord form has to be eternal. So it is very clearly established. Supreme Personality of Godhead said that those who fix their minds on my personal form and are all, see, that's why Srila Prabhupada, he translates not just my upon me, on my, but he also adds personal form. Just to clarify those who are the followers of so-called Advaitwadis or impersonalists, that this is a clear indication it's on my personal form. So he's adding that personal form also. So it is just mentioned my. My means upon me. So there is no, so that's why Prabhupada is leaving no scope for the impersonalists to translate as my means my effulgence or as Brahman. And or always engage in worshipping with great and transcendental faith are considered to be most perfect. So see, here there is a clear question differentiating between the impersonalists and bhaktas. So who is superior? And then here Krishna, obviously there is no question of saying that fixing their mind on my Brahman, Brahman, then it becomes impersonalist. So where is the distinguishing factor here? So very clearly stated that devotees and impersonalist. And who is superior? Devotees, they are superior. So this is another reference in which the Lord is clearly indicating how the devotees are superior. Right? So now see, Gita 12.1, and then later on, he states that this path is like troublesome and difficult and all that, which we have not covered. Verse number 1 to 5 is saying all this, but we have only covered 1 and 2. And then Bhagavad Gita in the 7.7 chapter 7th verse, Mata Parataram Nadyat Kinchid Asti Dhananjaya. So Krishna clearly explains that there is no truth superior to me. Okay. So he is like superior to everything, not just the material world, but he's also not just the demigods, but he's also superior to the Brahman. This is verse number 7.7 from the Bhagavad Gita. Then in the Bhagavad Gita 4.9, the 4th chapter 9th verse, Janma karma chame divyam evam yoveti takmata taktva deham punar janma neti mamneti. So Arjuna. So Krishna is clearly indicating that my activities, my birth, these are all chame divyam. These are transcendental. And those who can understand this tattva will come to me. So then, and then there is also this verse, Avajananti Mamuda, Manusham Tanum Ashrutam. So in the 9th verse, 9th chapter, verse number 11, Krishna also says that those who think that my body is material body, they are foolish people. So in chapter number 4 is indicating that my activities, my form, these are all, my birth is all divyam. It's all transcendental. And in this 9th chapter, he is also saying that, so there is consistency, because now he's saying that those who consider my form to be material, so they are all foolish people. Okay. And then in another verse of the Gita, Krishna says that those who deride my form, I make them fall down in the lower species of life. Okay. So from verses 9.10 to number 13, Krishna is explaining that the material energy is in my control in verse number 10. In 11, he says that those who deride my form are foolish people. And then in verse number 13, Krishna says that Mahatmanas to Mam Partha, Darivim Prakriti Mashrita. So who are Mahatmas? Those who take shelter of my divine energy. So energy, now when the Lord is possessor of energy, it is clearly established that he is a person. And then in the Bhagavad Gita 14th chapter, 27th verse, which we already discussed now, he says that Brahmano hi patishtaham, that I am the sustainer of the Brahman. And then in 10th chapter of verse number 8, Krishna says, Aham sarvasya prabhava, mata sarva prabhavatade. Right? So I am present everywhere. I am amam sarvasva prabhava. So this is all indication that Krishna is establishing the fact that the personality aspect of the Supreme is, of the absolute truth is supreme. Now there are Upanishads and other Puranas also. In fact, Srila Jiva Goswami, he has written a literature called as Bhagavad Sandarbh. This Bhagavad Sandarbh, he has collected all the verses from the Upanishads and the Puranas, wherein it is very clearly established that the Supreme has a form. That form is eternal, and the form is the possessor of Shaktis. So that is clearly established. So we'll just take some of them. So Upanishads and other scriptures also describe. So for example, Rasa Vaisa, and this is given in the Taittiriya Upanishad 2.7. So it is clearly mentioned in the Taittiriya Upanishad that the Supreme Lord, the form of the Supreme Lord is filled with rasa. And we are supposed to connect with the Lord in that rasa. Let me go through that verse. I will also share it on screen. Okay. Yeah. So rasa vaisa rasam evayam labda vanadi bhavati. So he is the highest self. Highest self is bliss in itself. The individual soul becomes blissful after attaining that bliss. This is in Taittiriya Upanishad. One second. Yeah, this is given in the Taittiriya Upanishad 2.7.1. Let me share the screen also. Yeah, so here it is clearly given. Rasa Vaisa Rasam Hi Evayam Labda Vananadi Bhavati. He himself is rasa, the taste of mellow of a particular relationship. And certainly one who achieves this rasa becomes anadi, anandi, filled with bliss. So this is the meaning of rasa vaisa, clearly stated in Taittiriya Upanishad. And then there are other references also, which are given in the scriptures. So now, quoting from the Padma Purana, it is mentioned the Yadus are described as eternal in the Padma Purana, in the Uttarakhand. So just as Lakshmana, Bharat, and Sankarshan take birth with the Lord, the Yadavas descending from the spiritual planet by the Lord's will take birth with the appearance of Lord Krishna and then return to his eternal dham along with him. The birth of these devotees is not caused by the bondage of karma. So in the Kartik Mahatmya Uttarakhand Padma Purana, it is mentioned Yatha Saumitri Bharata Yatha Sankarshanadaya Tatha Teneva Jayante Nijalokat Yadrichaya Punas Taneva Gachanti Tat Padam Shashvatam Param Na Karma Bandhanam Janma Vaishnavanam Cha Vidyate. So this is in the Padma Purana 6.229.57 to 58. And now it is also mentioned that even conceding to the faithless who think the people of Braj are material. If the people of Braj were material, the Devtas would not enjoy by using the senses of Braja's inhabitants. So it is mentioned that the Devtas used to enjoy through the senses of the Brajvasis. Now, Brajvasis, they are very special devotees and the residents of Vrindavan, Krishna's abode. And it is mentioned that the Brajvasis, so they were actually eternal and they were associates of the Lord. That's why the Devtas could enjoy through the senses. But it is not possible to enjoy through the senses of any living entity without um, being an eternal associate of the Lord, without being eternal form, having an eternal form of the form. Because Shankaracharya has commented on this particular sutra, which is Brahma Sutra 2.4.16. It is mentioned, Tasya cha Nityatvat. Jivas and Devtas are controllers because of the eternal will of the Lord, who is the chief controller. But Shankaracharya has commented saying that the Devtas control the senses of the Jivas, but do not enjoy through those senses. So the Devtas can control the senses of the Jivas, but they cannot enjoy using the senses of the Jivas. But here in this case, we see that the Devta used to enjoy using the senses of the Brajvasis. So the Brajvasis are also eternal. So now see, it is very clear when the associates of the Lord, they are eternal. So then what to speak of the Lord's form, Lord's body? These are all eternal. Okay. It is not possible that these are material. So this is clearly established in the Padma Puran. And then there is also the reference of in the Gopal Tapani Upanishad 2.26. It is mentioned that Sa Bhagava Kasmin Pratishtha Iti Sve Mahimni. The Lord is situated in his place, which is his own abode. That is called as Chando. This is stated in the Chandogya Upanishad 1.24.1. Therefore, it is said, Sakshat Brahma Gopala Purihi. Krishna's city is directly Brahman. It's also given in the Gopal Tapani Upanishad 2.26. And then further in the Gopal Tapani Upanishad, it is also mentioned, Durvas says that he who is beyond birth and old age, who is steady in form, qualities, pastime, and abode, who is indivisible, who resides on the bank of the Yamuna, who lives among the cows, who protects the cows, who lives among the cowherds, who resides in all the Vedas, who is praised in all the Vedas, and who entering all beings makes them special, is none other than the husband of you gopis. Gopal Tapani Upanishad 2.21. And then Gopal Tapani Upanishad further states, in the Uttara Mamamsa, it is concluded that the murtis described for worship in the scriptures are also eternal Lord. Tam Pitthagam Yetu Yajanti Dhiras Tesham Sukham Shaswatam Netare Sham. Those who worship the deity in the Pittha have eternal happiness, whereas others do not. So these are all given in the Upanishads. Let me share the screen also. So Durvasa says, we have just gone through this verse. Janma Jarabhyam Vinna Stanur Ayam Achetya Ayam Yosav Saurya Tishtati Yosav Gosu Tishtati Yosav Ga Palayati Yosav Gopeshu Tishtati Yosav Sarveshu Vedeshu Tishtati Yosav Sarva Veder Giyate Yosav Sarveshu Bhuteshu Avishya Bhutani Vidadati So Wo He Swami Bhavati. So this the translation I have already read, I have already shared. So these are the original Sanskrit verses from the respective scriptures. So there are umpteen amount of references from the scriptures which actually states that the Lord's form is eternal and he also exists in his personal form. Right? And then we have also the famous Ishopanishad verse. Ishopanishad verse number 50, mantra number 15. Let's also discuss from there. We can share the screen. Okay, Ishopanishad verse mantra number 15. Hiranmayena patrena satyasya pihitam mukham tatvam usan apavrinu satya dharma yadrishtaye. So synonyms. Hiranyam Mayena by a golden effulgence, Patrena by a dazzling covering, Satyasya of the supreme truth, Apihitam covered, Mukham the face, Tat that covering, Tom yourself, Kushan, O sustainer, Apav Renu, kindly remove, Satya pure, Dharmaya unto the devotee, Drishtaya for exhibiting. Translation: O my Lord, sustainer of all that lives, your real face is covered by your dazzling effulgence. Kindly remove that covering and exhibit yourself to your pure devotee. Very clearly stated that this effulgence is covering the face of the Supreme Lord. So the mantra is recited in order to ask the Lord to kindly remove that effulgence. So now it is very clearly indicated that the face of the Lord is superior to the effulgence, and effulgence is covering the supreme um, personal aspect of the Lord. Now, see, you cannot translate any other meaning or interpret another meaning from here, because Hiranyamaya clearly means it's a golden thing. Hiranya generally means golden. And then Patrena means dazzling covering. Okay, Patrena means you are covering with something. And then Satyasya Pihita Mukham. So the supreme truth, Satyasya, and Apihitam, covered. So Apihitam means covered, and Mukham, the face. The Mukham is a direct, the face is a direct translation of the word Mukham. Right. So again, very clear indication that the face of the Supreme Lord is covered by the impersonal effulgence, and that is inferior. And then there are many other verses also that Srila Jiva Goswami has quoted in the Bhagavad Sandarbha from different Upanishads, from Puranas. And now, apart from this, okay, so before going ahead, let's see if there are any questions or comments.
No, probably fine.
Okay. So see, apart from this, if you remember in our earlier talk shows, we have established how Srimad Bhagavatam is the ultimate authority, which is right. So we compared the Shruti and the Smritis, and then there are statements in the Shruti which give equal status to the Smritis also. And then among the Smritis, there is a lot of glorification of the Puranas, and Puranas glorify Srimad Bhagavatam to be ultimate. So we have established, using academic understanding of how Srimad Bhagavatam is the ultimate authority, using scriptures, how Bhagavatam is authority, and spiritual perspective also we have gone to the supreme position of Srimad Bhagavatam. The Srimad Bhagavatam very clearly establishes Krishna as a supreme object of worship, as a person. So, Ete Chamsha Kila Pamsha Krishnastu Bhagwan Swayam, Indriyari Vyakulam Lokam Hridayanti Yuge Yuge. So there are many statements in the Bhagavatam which indicates the personal form of the Lord, the qualities, the forms, the past tense of the Lord. The Srimad Bhagavatam is the ultimate authority. And what does the, so in one sense, even if you don't have any other scripture, if the Srimad Bhagavatam is there, then the Bhagavatam is like, the body of the Lord. It is actually called, the Padma Puran very clearly states, it compares the Srimad, the 12 cantos of Bhagavatam to the 12 parts of the form of the Lord. Right? So what is the meaning of that? So Srimad Bhagavatam itself, the name itself, Srimad Bhagavat, means the body of the Lord. It's actually the direct manifestation of the Lord. In fact, it is also mentioned that after the disappearance of Krishna, so how did Krishna appear? So Krishna appeared in the form of the Bhagavatam. Krishna Swadhama Pagate. Right? So this is clearly given in the Bhagavatam. The Bhagavatam states that the Lord is full of rasa. The entire Bhagavatam is full of rasa. Right? And then Bhagavatam, you see in the Bhagavatam, there is also the example of Srila Sukadeva Goswami, the Kumaras and the Navyogendras. They were all impersonalists in the beginning. But when Sukadeva Goswami heard the glories of Krishna in the womb from Vyasdev, then he also left his impersonalism. He got detached from his impersonalism and he got attracted to the pastimes of the Lord. And then he became a devotee. Similarly, Kumaras also, when they when they went to Vaikuntha and somehow they were able to smell the aroma of the tulsi leaves which were offered at the feet of the Lord, then that aroma itself transformed them completely, and they became bhaktas of the Lord. And then the Navyogendras also, they were oriented impersonalists, but then when they got association of I think Lord Shiva or Narada, then they also transform and they become devotees of the Lord. So see, this is the result of hearing the past and the law. So it is very clearly indicated that if you are attached to the supreme thing, then how come you can fall down to the inferior thing, right? If something is supreme and if you attain that thing, then nothing inferior can attract you. But here you see that the impersonalists got attracted to something which they thought it was inferior, but then they realized that it was actually superior. So you can always get attracted to superior things. You cannot get attracted to inferior, right? Like for example, 1 lakh also includes 1, 10, 100, 10,000 rupees, right? So obviously it has to be superior. Then only they can get attracted to that. And then it is very clearly mentioned that in the Brahma Samhita, now Brahma Samhita is not accepted by everyone as the authorized scripture, but especially in our Gaudiya Vaishnavas, we do accept it as a very bona fide authority because Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has claimed it very clearly. And now Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is Krishna himself. That is also evident in the scriptures. So many evidences in the scriptures how Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is not different from Krishna. So this Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is claiming that Brahma Samhita is actually the essence of all the scriptures in one sense. It is also the bona fide scripture to be considered. And Brahma Samhita very clearly states, Ishvara Parama Krishna Sachinananda Vigraha Anadir Adir Govinda Sarva Karana Karanam. Right? So very clearly stated in the Brahma Samhita that Ishvara Parama, amongst all the Ishvaras, the Parama is Krishna. Sachid Ananda Vigraha, the form is also eternal. It is not that Krishna is a material form. Although he may be supreme amongst the Devatas, you can accept that Ishvara Parama Krishna. But then his body is not material. Sachid Ananda Vigraha and Anadir Adir Govinda. So from beginningless, Krishna is the supreme personality of Godhead, like that. Very clearly established in the Brahma Samhita. And there are many verses in the Brahma Samhita that we can quote to prove the supremacy of the absolute truth as being a person. Okay. Now, in the Bhagavad Gita, 6.46, 6th chapter, 46th verse, 47th verse, there is a comparative analysis of the 3 types of transcendentalists. The worshippers of the impersonal Brahman, which is Jnani, the worshippers of the Paramatma, which is Yogi, and then the devotees of Lord Shri Krishna, Bhaktas. It is stated here that the Jnanis, those who have cultivated Vedic knowledge, are better than the ordinary fruitive activities, and the Yogis are still greater than the Jnanis. And among all Yogis, those who constantly serve the Lord with all their energies are the topmost. Yoginam api sarvesham madgantaratma saddhavam yavajate yomam yeme tamo mata. So let's also go through these verses from the Bhagavad Gita. I will share the screen again. Okay, so 6.46. Okay. Tapasvibhyo dikko yogi jnanibhyo pimatodhika karmibhyascha dikko yogi tasmad yogi bhavarjuna. Tapasvibhya, then the ecstatics, adhika, greater, yogi, the yogi, jnanibhya, then the wise, api, also, mata, consider, adhik, greater, karmibhya, then the fruitive workers, cha, also, adhik, greater, yogi, the yogi, tasmat, therefore, yogi, a transcendental bhava, just become Arjuna, O Arjuna. Now, see, this is a direct translation. There is no like interpretation here, right? Synonyms we have seen word to word translations. It is very clearly indicated. A yogi is greater than ascetic, greater than empiricist, and greater than the fruitive worker. Therefore, O Arjuna, in all circumstances, be a yogi. And the next verse, Krishna now says, now amongst all these yogis, who is the best one? So, yogi namapi sarvesham madgante antaratmana shraddhavam bhajato yomam same yukta tamo mata. Yoginam of yogis, api also, sarvesham of all types, madgatena, abiding in me, always thinking of me, anta atmana, within himself, shraddha in full faith, bhajate, renders transcendental loving service. Yeah, one who, Mam, to me, the Supreme Lord, so he may, by me, Yuktatama, the greatest yogi, Mata is considered. And of all yogis, the one with great faith who always abides in me, thinks of me within himself, and renders transcendental loving service to me. He is the most intimately united with me in yoga and is the highest of all. That is my opinion. So also this is a Vaishnava translation, but it is a direct translation. I mean, there is no need of giving explanation for this translation, right? It's a so in alignment with all the verses that we have discussed, the Vedanta philosophy, it is clear that this is how it is supposed to be translated. So see, now we have made a comparative analysis and we have shared references from the scriptures. What now we'll be doing is, at the end, we'll be logically trying to understand Anuman, using Anuman, how the philosophy of impersonal as being the supreme and personality being rejected or saying that it's Maya or temporary, it is completely illogical. So now we'll discuss that. But before that, any comments or any questions?
No problem.
Okay, so it seems that you are completely convinced.
Undoubtedly.
No arguments remaining in what we have presented till now. Okay, so logically, see the there is a goal of the Bhagavad Gita, right? Krishna is speaking the Bhagavad Gita with some intention, with some motive. The goal of the Bhagavad Gita, and then you see the conclusion of the Bhagavad Gita. So see, there is Jaimini Rishi has come up with this 5 principles to analyze the scripture, and this is not something which is accepted by the Vaishnavas, but it is accepted by everyone. This is accepted by everyone from all by all philosophers. Okay, and this is upakrama, beginning. So if you want to analyze a particular scripture and what is the goal of the scripture, what the scripture is trying to convey, right? So what are the 5 the methods in which it has to be analyzed to come to the particular conclusion that this is the conclusion of this particular scripture, and it is mentioned upakrama. So we have to see the beginning verses, opening verses of the scripture, then upasamhara, the conclusion of the scripture, the concluding verse of the scripture. Then we have to see abhyas, repetition, the repetitive verses of the scripture. Because see, if there is a particular conclusion or a goal, then the author is going to repeat that goal throughout the scripture, so that every reader will know that, okay, yeah, this is where I'm leading, this is where I'm supposed to reach. So there will be repetition or there will be special emphasis. And wherever there is emphasis, there is repetition. Then there is the apurvata, uniqueness, the uniqueness of the particular verses, which is unique. It is not common. Okay, it's something which is unique. And then finally, the phala. The phala means the result of that particular analysis. Okay, so we have to analyze all these texts using these 5 methods, and this is like commonly accepted amongst everyone. Although I think it was Jaimini Rishi or maybe some other sage who has given this, but everyone accepts this 5 methods of analyzing a subject. And it is very clear if you see the first beginning verse of the Bhagavad Gita, and then you see the concluding verse of the Bhagavad Gita. You also see the repetitive verses of the Bhagavad Gita. Bhakti Yoga has been repeatedly mentioned. So Krishna is always, like for example, here also, in the 6th chapter, there was a comparative analysis. And Krishna says that Yoginam api sarvesham. And he also uses the word Bhakta. So may Bhakta Tama, right? So Bhakta is always used in many of the chapters. So we'll see that there are repetitive words and emphasis is also given to these words. So from this analysis, five analysis, we can see that the goal of Krishna is to somehow make Arjuna become a devotee of the Lord and finally accept his will. So that's why the Bhagavad Gita also concludes by saying that Sarva Dharman Parityaja Mam Ekam Sharanam Vrajam. Abandon all types of dharmas and surrender to me. Okay? And I will relieve you from all the sinful reactions. So there is a proper intention of the speaker and the goal is very clear. Right? Now, let's assume that if the absolute truth is impersonal. So there are so many questions which will come up, and there are no answers for these questions. So Krishna wants Arjuna to become a devotee and ultimately come to him. So that's why he also speaks about the Janma Karma Cha Me Divyam, and he also speaks about living entities, how he can attain. How the living entities can attain him. Brahma Bhuvana Loka Punaravartino Arjuna Mam Upante Kaunteya Punarjanmana Vidyate. How can one get free from this cycle of birth, that old age disease, from karma, cycle of karma or reincarnation? So he says that whoever worships me, they will come to me. And then he also says that whoever worships other demigods, they will go to the abode of the different demigods. So he has very clearly distinguished between worship of other demigods and worship of him, right? And he has also established the goal, him as the goal, and that goal has to be eternal. If the goal is not eternal, then what is the use of worshipping the Lord? Right? So this is very clear. But now let's assume that Krishna is the manifestation of some Brahman and his body is temporary, he is also material in nature. Right? Body is material. So it is going to be destroyed at the end. So now tell me one thing. What is the purpose of Bhagavad Gita? If the Lord is manifestation of Brahman, is there any reason why Brahman has to manifest himself in the form of the Lord and he has to motivate the jivas to become Brahman? First of all, Brahman does not have any attribute. Brahman cannot speak. Brahman has no words. Right? So how can Brahman suddenly send some motive in this material world? Send some intentions and some goal in this material world? What will Brahman achieve by connecting the jivas to make them realize that we are all Brahman? See, ultimately, any impersonalist or Vedanta Advaitavadis, they will say that the goal is that to realize that we are Brahman. So the Bhagavad Gita, the goal of Bhagavad Gita should also be the same, because Gita is one of the Prasthanya thrice. Prasthan thrice is Gita, Upanishad, and Vedanta Sutra. They should all be aligned in the goal. They should have one goal. Bhagavad Gita cannot say that, well, Krishna is a person and you go to Krishna, you go to Goloka, you go to Vaikuntha. Whereas you say that in the Vedanta Sutra and the Upanishad, they are saying that ultimately we are all Brahman. So there is a contradiction in the statements of Upanishad, Vedanta Sutra, and the Bhagavad Gita. So Bhagavad Gita, in order to be a Prasthantrayi or authoritative or the culmination of the Veda, Krishna also says that Vedeshcha Sarvar Eva Vedya, Vedanta Krit Vedavid Eva Cham. The goal of no Vedas is to know me, and I am the compiler of the Vedanta. Krishna says like that. So now, in order to be aligned with the other goals of Vedanta Sutra as well as Upanishad, the goal of the Gita has to be very clear, and that should be attainment or realizing the fact that you are Brahman. Right? So then, what is the purpose of this entire creation? If ultimately we are all Brahman, how we, first of all, from where have we come in this material world? Why have we forgotten that we are Brahman? And now we are struggling with this material body. How did that happen? And why are we having these material forms and having relationships in the material world? Because Brahman is without Shaktis. Brahman is completely it's all pervading, but it does not have anything. It has nothing. So how come we jivas, we have been in this material world and we have been engaged in relationships and we are experiencing happiness, distress in this material world. So all these questions, they are not answered by what answer they have is you gain knowledge and you realize everything and you realize that you are Brahman. But there is no answer to these questions. So Brahman as the goal does not make sense at all. There is no logic in that. Now again, also, Brahman is one, everything is one. Sarvam Klam Idam Brahman, right? Everything is one. So then how come we jivas are separate? So that's the question. So where is what is the position of Maya? Where is Maya? So they are saying that when we are influenced by the avidya potency of the when we are influenced by the avidya potency, then we become jiva, and we become influenced by the vidya potency, we become Ishvara. Again, this Ishvara is not the same the way we define, the Vaishnavas define. It is Ishvara who has a tentative material body, temporary, but they have more powers. They are like the controllers to some extent. So, how did Ishwar manifest? Why did Ishwar manifest? Why did the Jiva manifest? And something is also influencing Brahman. When Brahman is covered by the avidya potency, it becomes Jiva. Then it means Brahman is influenced by something which is superior. Otherwise, how can Brahman be influenced? Right? If Brahman is the absolute ultimate truth, it is superior to anything, then nothing can influence Brahman. Correct? So it does not make sense. Then how do you define what is Vidya, what is Avidya? See, you are saying Brahman is everywhere, it's all pervading, but then you are also saying there is a position of Maya, there is Vidya, Avidya, there are the Jivas. Where are all these things lying? Because Brahman is not, and you know, so does not make sense. I mean, are you cutting Brahman and then the Jivas are created or the Jivas are manifested? So, you know, and or it is, so there are like different philosophies, which is the Parichedvad and the Pratibhimbavad. So they say that Pratibhimbavad means the Jivas are the reflected. Just like, you know, the sun is reflected in the house. The sun is like Brahman, but the sun rays is reflected in the house. So similarly, Brahman reflects himself when covered by ignorance, then it becomes Jiva. But these are all, see, these things are all there. This is all defined by Shankaracharya. I mean, yes, Tatvamasi, you are that, yes, I am Brahman, no doubt about it, because I am part and parcel of the Supreme Brahman. So in that sense, I'm also Brahman, sun and the sun rays. So I am not the sun, but I'm the sun ray. I am the ray of the sun. So what is Brahman? Brahman is actually the effulgence, the ray of the Lord. So we can say that, yeah, I am Brahman, because Brahman, as the minute Jiva living entity, they are all pervading. It's a Shakti of the Lord. Shakti, the effulgence is all pervading. So there are Jivas, but then they are also localized. They are universally present, but they are also localized. And they are individuals. So the Jivas are individuals. Okay. So Tattvamasi, Sarvam, Klam, Idam, Brahman. We accept all these statements. We do not reject these statements. We are accepting it, but we are also fitting it in a proper context. Right? So the four Mahavakyas, Ham Brahmasmi, Tattvamasi, and Ayam Atma Brahma and Prajnanam Brahma, which basically indirectly says that we are all Brahman. So we accept that. But in quality, we are Brahman, not in quantity, because we are ultimately controlled. There is a Maya which is controlling us. And then there are so many statements about the Lord Shakti. So how do you reject that? So it cannot be rejected. Let's accept all these statements and then see in that proper context. So then everything becomes reconciled. by saying that, yeah, all these statements are true. Vedas, whenever the Vedanta is speaking about something, it is all true. It cannot be rejected. In fact, Vyasdev himself says in the Vedanta Sutra that if there are two statements contrary in the scripture, then you need to interpret another statement so as to fit in the right context. We have to reconcile it. You cannot reject one of them and say that this is only true. If there are two contrary statements, interpret one of them so that you can fit it in the right context. That's clearly mentioned by Srila Vyasdev in the Vedanta Sutra. Okay, so using this tool, we can accept that all the statements of the scriptures are true, but they are all true, and then we can reconcile it. So this is done by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Now, other Vaishnava philosophies coming from Madhvacharya, Ramanujacharya, then the Visishta Advaitvad and Shuddha Advaitvad, and then we have the Veda Ved by Nimbarkacharya. So these, they have certain deficiencies. They are not complete in themselves because they contradict certain scriptures. Like for example, Madhvacharya, he gave a completely opposite philosophy to that of Advaitvad, which is Dvaitavad. So Dvaitavad means everything is different. You, me, Jiva, the relation between the Jiva, between one Jiva, another Jiva, relation between Jiva and the Supreme Lord, relation between Jiva and the material world, relation between the material world and the Supreme Lord. So these are all, they are like all separate, all different. Okay. So this is Dvaitavad, this is separating everything. And Advaitavad is uniting everything. One, everything is one. So there is the philosophy which is given by Ramanujacharya, which is called as the Visishta Advaita, which means that the Lord and the Jiva, like they are in the it is like compared to the Lord is compared to the Atma, and the Jiva is compared to the body. So the body and the Atma is in the same, like inside the same body, right? So that in that sense there is oneness. But the Lord is the supreme controller. The Jiva is the dependent factor. So just like the body is also dependent on the Atma for functioning, so similarly the Jivas are also dependent on the Lord, but they are one in that sense. So like Vishish Advaitvad, and then there is Shuddha Advaita by Vallabhacharya philosophy. So specified monism and purified monism. Shuddha Advaita is purified monism. Monism is oneness, but that is purified. And Visishta means specified, specific monism. That is Visishta Advaita. Then we have Dvaitavad of Madhvacharya, and then we have Veda Ved of Nimbarkacharya, which is very close to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's philosophy of Veda Ved Tattva. And then, but it is called as Swabhaviki Veda Ved, which is natural. These contrary principles are naturally present in the Lord. That's why it is called as Swabhaviki. It's the Swabhav of the Lord. But we, instead of Swabhaviki, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's philosophy is Achintya Veda Ved Tattva, inconceivable. Right? So, one particular important reasoning we can clearly see is that the progression of the acharyas, the sequence of the acharyas appearing. So we'll see after Shankaracharya, we have the 4 Vaishnava acharyas appearing, and then finally we have Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. The sequence is not reverse. It is not the Chaitanya Mahaprabhu appears and then at the end Shankaracharya is appearing to establish Advaita as the ultimate goal. But there is a logical progression. So there is some upgradation of philosophy. In all these acharyas, they are upgrading the philosophy. And then finally Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is giving the ultimate philosophy. So you see, Shankaracharya gave interpretation to the Vedas. He twisted it because he wanted to serve a purpose, and that purpose was to somehow bring back the Vedas, which Lord Buddha had rejected. So in the Bhagavatam, it is mentioned that Buddha had rejected the Vedas because in the name of Vedas, there was a lot of animal sacrifice happening. And Kali Yuga, animal sacrifice is banned. It is prohibited. So, especially horse sacrifice. So that is bad. But in the name of Vedic sacrifices, they were killing animals. So Buddha had to come, then he had to propagate the philosophy of non-violence, voidism, so that this will stop. And then immediately after that, Shankaracharya appeared. And then in order to bring the Vedas back, we had to like propagate the philosophy of Advaitwad, Mayavad. And there are also references in the scriptures, in the Padma Purana and the Shiv Purana, where the Lord is instructing Lord Shiva to incarnate in the form of Shankaracharya and to spread this Mayavad philosophy so that people will be bewildered and they will kind of sort of become atheistic in nature. Although the Vedas will be there, but the philosophy is as good as being atheist. So it was the instruction of the Supreme Lord. And so after Shankaracharya, so what Buddha did, he gave the philosophy of Nashta Nashta, Nashti Nashti, Nast, everything was void. And then Shankaracharya upgraded that philosophy to Neti Neti. So from Nashta to Neti, Neti means the absolute is something, but does not have anything. So Brahman is there. Buddha said that there is nothing, absolutely void, no Brahman also. So Shankaracharya just upgraded and he said that there is Brahman, but it has nothing. And the four Vaishnava acharyas, they came one after the other, and then they started making increments or upgradation in the philosophy of Shankara. And then finally Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So see, this is a logical sequence of how the philosophy evolves. And this is the sequence in which they appeared. It's a historical fact. One cannot argue that no, Shankaracharya appeared after Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu appeared much before Shankaracharya. We cannot explain that. So it's a historical fact. So these are all logical evidences. We can understand that the philosophy of Advaita does not make sense. That the highest aspect of the absolute is impersonal. It does not make sense in any way. So these are all anuman, logical inference, and we can clearly see that how it is not acceptable. Now, there is also the angle of direct perception, pratyaksha. So see, pratyaksha, from that perspective, we can see that pratyaksha or direct perception means that you are able to witness, you are able to experience something, you are able to realize something by following a particular path, right? So now, the Advaitwadis, when they are following a particular path, they are also seeing that they are getting some reciprocation when they are following a particular path. So they are also advancing in their path. It means that there is some superior being who is actually controlling, right? Otherwise, see, if everything is Brahman, Brahman is not a person and he cannot understand anything. There is no attribute to Brahman. So how do the Advaitwadis, impersonalists, they also advance in their path? No, it is because the absolute truth is a person. He is sanctioning, he's allowing them also to progress. And so that's why in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna also states that those who are worshippers of other demigods or other paths, they are worshipping me only indirectly, but they are doing so in a wrong way. Avidhi Purvakam. So without the right way. It's the wrong way actually. So here also we can see through direct perception also we can realize that if I am following a particular path, that path, if I am advancing, that means there is some reciprocation from some superior being who is making me advance in that path. And the fact that the path is prescribed by the scripture or it is given somewhere, it means that ultimately we are controlled by that. Because if we do not follow that path, if we do not follow the prescribed rules and regulations set out in the scripture, then we will get a corresponding bad reaction for that. And that clearly means that there is a supreme controller. Right? So someone is seeing me. Someone is seeing me and giving me results for my efforts. That's the meaning of all this discussion related to pratyaksha. That I am able to get some reciprocation and I am able to go ahead in the path. If let's say if there is no superior being and if I get stuck in this, I don't go ahead, then all these paths will collapse. There will be only one path, which is the ultimate truth. So that's why Krishna says that Ye yata mam prapadante tam sataiva bhajamiyam manavartamanu vartante manushya partha sarvasa. That as you surrender to me, I reward you accordingly. And when you talk about controlling things, when you talk about giving results, that is only done by a person. It is not done by Brahman. Brahman will not even have that concept, because Brahman is formless. It is without any attribute. So how can, like, then otherwise what you're saying is Brahman being the absolute is thinking of the welfare of the living entities, and he's accordingly is giving part to the living entities to follow, and then he's also giving the results to the living entities. Then what you are saying is Brahman is doing everything without a form. That's it. So then you are just not giving a form to Brahman. You are rejecting that form, but then you are assigning all the attributes to Brahman. So that is contrary. That is completely contradictory to the nature of Brahman. So you want to assign everything to Brahman, but just not the form. That's it. So there is an ulterior motive here, right? So this is logically we can deduce that it does not make any sense. You know how, and then how does karma also start? Why does karma start in the material world? Absolutely no answers for these questions. And then, yeah, so suddenly from material relationship, you are going to something which is void, completely void. There is no consistency. You're coming from nothing, and in between you are exchanging relationships, you are a person, and then suddenly you are becoming nothing. What is the purpose of doing all these things? Why? So there are no answers to these questions. So the philosophy of Achinta Bhedavet Tattva is the most evolved philosophy, is the most complete form, because it reconciles everything. It accepts everything, every statement on scripture, and it reconciles. Whereas other philosophies, they do contradict the scriptures to some extent, because they're not giving because they have to reject some parts, some portion of the scripture. Yeah. So yeah, I think we are done now. If you would like to discuss something, or if you have any.
Is there any direct experience of the Brahma Jyoti, that is Brahman, in the material world?
Yeah, I mean, those who are impersonalists, they do get see, that's what I'm saying, right? If people who are practicing impersonalism, and if they do not get the result of that, then there will be no experience of Brahman. But the fact that there are people who are Brahman, like the scripture very clearly states that Sukdev Goswami was impersonalist. He was in the Brahman realization platform, and the Kumaras also. So there is a fact that, okay, Brahman realization do exist. So then who is giving that result? So we can understand clearly. So yeah, when you are Brahman realized, you see the effulgence of the Lord everywhere. You see everyone as one. So like that.
So the light that we experience through our material senses, is that a reflection of the Brahman Jyoti?
The light?
The light, see, everything is self-effulgent in the spiritual world. They don't require a sun or a star. But in the material planet, the light that we see, is that a reflection? Is that a reflection of the Brahma Jyoti, the Brahman?
Yeah, in the spiritual world, it is a effulgence of the Lord which is illuminating everything. That is given in the scriptures. The Bhagavad Gita itself, it is mentioned.
So in that sense, that is how we can perceive the impersonal form, in the form of that reflection. That is
See,
one of the.
a devotee of the Lord will perceive this impersonal effulgence of the Lord in terms of understanding that we are all part and parcel of the Supreme Lord. So in that sense, we are all one. And he will also see the presence of the Lord everywhere, in everything. So in that sense also, he will see oneness in everything. But so oneness, according to Vaishnava philosophy, is that they will see the Lord everywhere. And so everything becomes one. Some Pandita Samadarshina. So whether in animal, in plants, in living entities, in the atoms, in the material things, everywhere the Uttamadhikari sees the Lord. So he will perceive everything as one because he realizes that everything is part and parcel of the Supreme Lord. So in that sense, oneness in terms of quality.
Okay. So this personal form of Lord that we hear in from the scriptures, that when it is shot by the arrow and it pierces his toe,
Okay.
right? So that is just an arrangement to bewilder those who believe that Lord form is
Okay, so
temporary.
that is, yeah. So if you remember, we have discussed this in depth in our devotee classes, and the reason for the destruction of the Yaru dynasty. Two parts I have covered. But in brief, I would like to say is that, so Srila Jiva Goswami, he clearly mentioned this point in this Sandarbha, and he says that actually the demons, they never saw the form of the Lord, the Swarup of the Lord directly. Because whenever, see, in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says that one cannot perceive my form directly. And he puts a curtain, Yog Maya, the potency of the Lord, by his Yog Maya potency or by his Maya potency, you cannot perceive the Lord directly. So, and then, Ye tamam prapadante tam satai bhajamiyam. As you surrender, I reward accordingly. So, those who do not want to see the Lord will cover himself. Or those who have mentality like that, those of demons, the Lord will not show themselves to, he will not show himself to them. So what he does, he covers himself by his potency, might potency. And that's why the demons, they see the material form of the Lord. So he is covered, the Swarup Shakti of the Lord is covered by the material form of the Lord. That they will see. And this is what Jiva Goswami says, that it was left in the material world when the Lord passed away. So in the original spiritual body, the Lord went away to his abode. But what did the Lord leave in this material world? So Srila Vishwanath Thakur and Jiva Goswami say, he left his material body in the material world. See, that's why the Bhagavatam talks about both things. Bhagavatam says that the Lord, he came with his original form and he disappeared in his original form, and the Lord did not have to practice anything, any mystic yoga or anything. And then the form of the Lord is also described very blissful. When all these things happened, the Lord was actually smiling and he was in bliss. So the Bhagavatam describes the Lord left in his same body, in his same spiritual transcendental body in the spiritual world. And the Bhagavatam also says that there is a funeral ceremony, that the funeral ceremony was also conducted of the Lord. Okay, so now what in that funeral ceremony, which body was there? Because the Lord went in his original body to the spiritual world. So the Acharyas explained that the Lord actually left a material body for materialistic people to be bewildered. So there was a material form that the Lord left that was burned in the funeral ceremony, like that. So this is how we reconcile everything. We reconcile everything that the scriptures talk about. We don't reject it. I mean, this is just a brief answer, but I mean, there are so many other things also to be explained related to the passing away of Krishna and the Yaru dynasty. Yeah.
Okay, bro. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So it's already 6:30, and yeah. So thank you so much for your patience, your time, and all the efforts that you put, so that many people can get the facts clear. And yeah, thank you all the viewers also for joining in.
Thank you.